Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. I'm Rosina Snow, the Director of Communications at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm joined today by Mark Sabath, and I will give a fuller introduction in a moment. Before we start today, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement. We want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I'm currently in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is Monacan land. And I don't know if you know what land you're on, Mark, but if not, there is a way you can find out. I'll put that link here, nativeland.ca. It's a worthwhile exercise. And today we're going to talk about an important environmental justice issue that folks may have been hearing about a bit more recently, and that's regarding the AdvanSix chemical plant in Hopewell, Virginia. AdvanSix Resins and Chemicals LLC's plant is at 905 East Randolph Road in Hopewell, and it manufactures caprolactam, which is used to make nylon fiber and fertilizer. It also emits significant amounts of air pollutants that can be harmful to human health, as they tend to be, including nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. So that's a fun mix there. Over the past 2 years, the AdvanSix plant has experienced several unpermitted releases of pollutants, including ammonia, oleum, nitrogen oxides, and sulfur dioxide. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and DEQ have cited the AdvanSix plant repeatedly over the past 20 years for violations of federal and state air pollution laws. Now the plant is seeking the renewal of its Title V permit, which includes federal and state pollution requirements. And community members are organizing to make sure the plant is held to a higher standard. Joining me today is again Mark Sabath, who is a senior attorney at Southern Environmental Law Center, SELC, and who has been working on this issue. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And just to give a bit of a fuller introduction, Mark engages in litigation and advocacy to protect clean water, advance environmental justice, and fight harmful fossil fuel infrastructure. He has served as lead counsel representing conservation groups, including challenging Clean Water Act rollbacks and Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's approval of the now canceled Atlantic Coast Pipeline. He also coordinates SELC's work to promote environmental justice in Virginia. And this is definitely a big environmental justice issue. So to begin our conversation, would you please add any details that I might have missed regarding the context of this situation that people should know?
Sure. So we're talking about a really large chemical manufacturing plant, the AdvanSix plant in Hopewell. For those of you who aren't familiar with Hopewell, it's about 25 miles southeast of Richmond. And this plant is, as I said, it's massive. It's like a 450-acre property with a number of different chemical manufacturing units on the property, over 1,000 employees, and it's been there for quite a long time. It also has a history of violations of federal and state law and of releases of some of the air pollutants you mentioned, unpermitted releases of those air pollutants. And it's located in Hopewell, which is a community that has a number of other large industrial facilities and bears really a greater environmental burden than most communities in Virginia. And so we heard about the permit from this Title V permit, which we'll talk about, that was up for renewal from some of our partners, and see this as a real important opportunity to ensure that the facility is doing everything it can to comply with its obligations, and not further burdening the community with air pollution. So we've been talking with partner organizations, including yours, and with community members in Hopewell, to do everything we can to ensure that this next permit is as protective as possible.
Mm-hmm. So could you talk a bit about what a Title V permit is and how it works?
Sure, and it's called a Title V permit. It's because it arises under Title V of the Federal Clean Air Act. It's really a federal operating permit what it does is it combines in one place all of the federal and state requirements that apply to a facility that's emitting air pollution. So it puts all of those requirements in one place so that the facility knows, the regulators know, the public knows what requirements apply. And then the other thing, and so those requirements might be monitoring for, monitoring its equipment, keeping regular maintenance of that equipment, and keeping records of that maintenance and reporting that to regulators and the public. So a good, effective Title V permit will do two things, really. It'll clearly identify what those requirements are, and then it will also have conditions in the permit to assure that compliance with those requirements. So those might be regular monitoring or stack testing or reporting of, again, some of this maintenance and testing and other things, so that we have a much better sense that the facility is complying with the requirements that apply to it.
Mm-hmm. So there have been several violations of the existing permit, or the one that's expiring soon. Is that correct? Or are these releases of chemicals, were those violating the previous permit or not violating the previous permit?
Yeah, they're violating, I guess you could say, violating the permit. It's violating the requirements that are all included in the permit. And so, yeah, there have been a number of releases, some of them well publicized, well documented, of a number of pollutants over the years, and both the federal EPA and the state Department of Environmental Quality have taken some action against the facility. They've at least issued notices of violation, but a lot of those NOVs, those notices of violation, haven't yet been resolved. And in fact, in the permit, DEQ, the state agency that has drafted this permit and put it out for public comment, has said, we're not putting any additional measures in to resolve those issues because those are subject of a separate enforcement action, but we have yet to see what the outcome of any enforcement action will be.
So it kind of seems like the previous permit didn't have wasn't adequately aggressive. I mean, is that accurate to say?
I think that's a real concern, is that, I think for any facility, you want to ensure that there are these monitoring and record keeping and reporting requirements in there that are sufficient to assure compliance. But it's especially important for a facility like this that's had a lot of problems, complying with its existing obligations over the years.
Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, that the DEQ writes a different permits for any particular facility. Like different facilities get their own permits that are specific to them.
That's right. So this is. That's right. So this is a Title V permit that's specific. I mean, some of the requirements might be the same as they might impose on another facility, another plant, but this is a permit specific to the AdvanSix plant in Hopewell.
Okay, and it's expiring. Has it already expired, or is it soon to expire?
The way this often works, the last permit was issued in 2014, so that permit was actually due to expire in 2019. But as often happens, that just gets continued while a new application comes in. The agency reviews it, and it's kind of amazing that it's been another 5 years now before this new permit was put out for public comment. But so they're still operating under the one from 2014 that's, I think, been amended a couple times over the years. But then this will be a new permit that will apply for the next 5 years if it's issued.
Yeah, this is something that just occurred to me, but I know that I guess the EPA has come out with some more strict rules regarding particulate matter recently. Would that affect the new permit or?
It's a good question. The way that Title V works, it doesn't, and this is sort of an important thing in terms of what you're hoping to get out of commenting on a Title V permit. The Title V permit doesn't generally set stricter emission limits or requirements in that way. Those emission limits and requirements are set elsewhere. What the permit does is summarize them and then put measures in place to assure or try to assure that the company is meeting those requirements. So, but at the same time, that that proposed rule from EPA does sort of emphasize how harmful these pollutants like particulate matter can be, and why it's so important to ensure that that they're sticking to the limits that they have.
Yeah. I guess another question about that is just you mentioned that they've gotten notices of violation and that those are sort of like up in the air, not resolved. Is there a point at which a plant or facility needs to be shut down temporarily if they're just repeatedly violating these rules and harming the community around them, or no?
I think there might be a point. I think that's a pretty heavy lift. That's a pretty rare thing. But what we do want to do is ensure that those violations are resolved, that measures are taken so that there aren't these repeated violations. And this Title V permitting process is an important part of that.
Okay. So what's in the current draft of the new permit for AdvanSix? And do you feel like it's adequate or not?
So we and others are preparing comments on it. So we're still working on that. I think there are a couple of concerns that have jumped out to us in reviewing the draft permit. I mean, one actually goes back to not the permit itself, but the application and the materials that go into the creation of the permit and into the public's ability to review the permit and decide whether it's adequate. And that's that we don't have information about exactly what different units at the facility, different pieces of equipment are emitting, and the calculations of what they're estimated to emit over the coming years. And without that, it's really hard to determine whether the conditions that are in the permit are sufficient to ensure compliance. So that is something that we have pressed and will continue to press DEQ to ensure that AdvanSix provides to DEQ and that DEQ makes available to the public so we can see that. There's also concern about some of the how strict or not strict some of the monitoring requirements are. For example, testing of the stacks is a way to ensure that you're not violating your emission limits. If you don't have continuous monitoring of the emissions over time, then you do these periodic stack tests where you test to see the emissions. And there are few or no requirements of that periodic stack testing, which seems especially critical given the history at this plant.
Yeah, that does seem like a big oversight. Has there been more attention to this, like in that 5-year period where there's been sort of a lapse in the renewal, or has this been like a longstanding concern? Like, has this kind of grown as far as the attention it's received and the organizing around it recently?
I think, I mean, we've seen there's been a number. It goes back further than the past year, but in the past year there have been some articles in the press about the history of violations at the facility and some of the releases. There's been some attention from Congresswoman McClellan, who represents this district, reaching out to the company and expressing some frustration with the responses that she has gotten. So I think it has gotten some more attention, and I think that's appropriate given the history, and again, given the community that it's located in, and the burden that community members already face from this facility and from others in the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, could we talk a little bit more about the environmental burdens that the Hopewell community is facing? Because we did list off some scary sounding pollutants at the beginning, but if we could go a little bit further into that, I think that would be really helpful for people.
Yeah,
to know.
there's a statistics that when we were looking at the emissions records for the facility in past years, and you look at Hopewell, which is, let's say there are about 23,000 people in Hopewell, so it has about 0.2% of Virginia's population. But if you add up all of the emissions from AdvanSix and the other facilities in Hopewell, combined, they account for over 6% of the major air pollutants, the so-called criteria pollutants in all of Virginia, and over 8% of air toxics, which are particularly hazardous air pollutants. So Hopewell is getting well over what you could ever consider a fair share of air pollution from this cluster of facilities, including AdvanSix. And we know that Hopewell is a community that has a significant population of people of color. It's over 50% people of color, primarily Black. There are higher rates of people classified as low income in Hopewell than in the state at large, and there are higher levels of health issues, things like cancer, heart disease, asthma, in Hopewell than in other communities in Virginia. And so it is it's a community that's really subjected to a heavy environmental and health burden already, and so anything that we can do and that community members can do and others can do to ensure that it's not getting worse and that the laws are being enforced against this facility, all the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one statistic that jumped out at me is that the life expectancy there is like significantly lower than for the rest of Virginia. I think it was only 69 is the average life expectancy in Hopewell, and that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, that's about 8 years shorter than the average in Virginia as a whole, and just illustrates the challenges that community is facing, and the importance of making sure that we're not making things worse.
Mm-hmm. For those who don't, it could be helpful for those watching to just kind of Google Hopewell to see where it is. It's like southeast of Richmond, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
How many miles?
About 25 miles, and
25
right
miles.
on the James River is where the AdvanSix facility is.
Right, on the James River. So, of course, we, especially at Interfaith Power and Light, we care about our neighbors wherever they are. But for those who don't live in that area, or for those who are further upstream rather than further downstream, how does this affect others in the state and even further away?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a shared concern about just what we were talking about the burden that we're placing on certain communities, and so I think that is something that goes beyond just the people who are directly affected by the air pollution from this one facility. And I think there's a general interest too in ensuring that that industrial facilities are following the rules and are doing, and that state regulators are doing everything they can to put steps in place, put measures in place to make it easier for the facility to comply, easier for the state and the public to know when they're not complying and to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is going on? Where are we in this process at this point?
So we are there's the way that Title V permitting works. There's a 30-day comment period for the public to comment on it. That has been extended by 2 weeks. So the comment period now closes on Monday, this coming Monday. And at the same time, the federal EPA has an opportunity to review the permit, and if it finds that it's not up to snuff, to object to the permit. So
Mm-hmm.
EPA has its review, the public has its review period, and that's going on now, and that will end on Monday. And then after that, one thing that can happen is if it's a matter of significant public importance in Virginia, and people can ask for this, you can get a public hearing where people who commented during the comment period can also address DEQ at a public hearing, raise their concerns, their questions, their comments in person at a hearing to give additional input to DEQ about the permit and about the facility.
Mm-hmm. And those who are, organizing to get people to, by the way, the link to that commenting space or what have you is linked here on the screen. So are folks trying to encourage people to ask for a public hearing? Is that a big ask that we're trying to push for?
I think that would be a great thing. Yes, if people
Mm-hmm.
can specifically ask for a public hearing, that will give community members and their supporters and other groups the opportunity to speak directly to DEQ, in addition to submitting comments in writing at this point, to be able to talk to officials at DEQ about the facility in a public hearing.
Okay. And can those outside of Hopewell comment? Is this open to all people in Virginia?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that seems like probably the number one way that people can support this. Would you say, or are there other ways?
I think that's right. We're in the comment period right now, and that's a great thing to show support for the Hopewell community and for strong enforcement of the federal and state air pollution laws by participating in the public comment period.
Mm-hmm. Great. Is there anything else that you think people should know about what's going on with AdvanSix?
Well, I mean, I think, if you go to that website, they list the draft permit there, and you look at it, and it's I forget if it's 80 pages long. It's a highly technical document. It's hard for us to even to make sense of it. And so on one hand, this is, a sort of a highly technical Clean Air Act matter. But at the same time, at its core, this is about ensuring that that people have clean air to breathe, and that their families are safe from releases and things that have happened at the facility and there and elsewhere. And so I think it's even if it seems like a highly technical thing, it really, at its core, it's about ensuring that we all have clean air to breathe and that we're all safe. And so I think it's a really important thing for people to pay attention to.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I would encourage anyone who's watching to go to that link and file a comment, and also to share. You share this video, share that link, and we have 3 more days, so let's make the most of it. And then we'll keep you in the loop to let you all know what's going on with this. And it's lovely to see so many people paying attention to something that needs attention, and to amplify that cause throughout the Commonwealth, so that as these issues come up in certain places, we need people from across the state to pay attention and to care and to take action. And that way we lift all of us up. But everyone should have clean air to breathe. That's just basic. So I thank you for your work and your attention on this.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone. And please do take maybe just a few minutes to enter a comment. And we'll see you next week. Bye.